Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. This is a story about my college buddy Mark's grandfather and how he handled his inheritance in an unconventional way. He had two sons, Jake and Michael, and each of them also had two kids. In the last 6 months of his life, around 2019, Mark and I visited him every morning and evening. You see, he didn't want to move into a retirement home, and apart from needing assistance getting ready in the mornings and evenings, he was pretty self-sufficient. Now, a little background. Back then, we still had a mandatory 1-year military service, but there were ways around it. The most common way was to claim conscientious objection. You just had to write a 1-page essay explaining why serving in the military would violate your personal ethics, and they had to accept it. But that meant you had to do civil service instead. Civil service jobs were essentially any role that served society in some way, like working in a kindergarten, retirement home, hospital, or delivering meals to the elderly. You'd get paid the same as soldiers with similar benefits like housing, healthcare, and food allowance. I did my civil service at a retirement home, and it was an eye-opening experience that really matured me. Anyway, after finishing my civil service, I was just looking for some temporary work to make some cash. That's when Mark approached me, saying his grandpa needed help getting ready but didn't want to go to a nursing home yet. He later admitted his grandpa had threatened to kill himself rather than move to one. Since I knew how to assist the elderly from my time at the retirement home, Mark asked if I could show him how to care for his grandpa. Mark was one of my closest friends, and I really liked his grandpa too. He was like a bonus grandpa to me growing up, so I agreed. The plan was for me to train Mark for a couple of weeks and then supervise him for another couple of weeks before he took over fully. But we ended up doing it together for over 6 months until his grandpa had a stroke and passed away within 2 days at the hospital. 2 days later, Mark asked me to come with him to the lawyer's office for the reading of the will. His grandpa had specifically requested that it be read the day before his burial, which is a bit unusual but legal. I asked Mark why I was invited, and he told me the lawyer had extended an invitation since his grandpa had left me something as a thank you for my care. I was a bit embarrassed, but also touched that the old man had valued my help so much. Now, Mark's dad Jake is an entitled jerk, and the same goes for his uncle Michael. We arrived at the lawyer's office, and this happened. Jake, to me. "Why the hell are you here? I know Dad jokingly called you his 5th grandkid, but this is for real family only." Michael: "I bet the little moocher was hoping to get some money in the will." Me: "I was asked to be here by the lawyer. Take it up with him if you have an issue." Jake: "If you pulled some stunt to get your hands on his money, I'll sue you so hard your grandkids will still need lawyers." Mark: "Show some respect and stop yelling. I know you two didn't really care about your own dad, but at least have a shred of decency." Michael: "How dare you talk like that to your elders, you little crap." Mark shouting: "You get exactly as much respect from me as you showed your father. None." That shut them up, at least momentarily. We sat down and had to wait for Jake and Michael's other kids to arrive. The two of them sat behind us, and what they were saying really made my blood boil. Apparently they had both bought new cars, jewelry for their wives, and planned lavish vacations, all on credit, expecting to pay it off with the inheritance money. Not a single word about missing their dad or being sad he had died, just entitlement and greed competing over who could blow through the money faster. Finally, when everyone had arrived, the lawyer read out a letter, which I'll summarize here. "In recent years, I've realized that some family members cared about me more than others. I'm especially disappointed in my sons, Jake and Michael, but I wanted to be fair and impartial, so I came up with a point system. Letter, phone call, 1 point, plus 1 extra for very long calls. Visit, 2 points per hour, plus 1 point per hour of travel time. Helping me with something, 3 points per hour. Here are the final totals over the last 3 years. Jake, 8 points. Michael, 10 points. Michael's kid, 1, 150 points. Michael's kid 2, 133 points. Jake's other kid, 288 points. Mark, 7,341 points. Mark's friend, me, 5,883 points. My lawyer has liquidated most of my assets, except for the house. Once it's sold, the money will be divided according to these point totals, determining the value of each point. Everyone will then receive a share proportional to their points." For a minute you could have heard a pin drop. Then Jake and Michael started shouting simultaneously, insisting they knew we had pulled some trick and that the will would never stand up in court. Of course, they tried suing. Michael's kids joined him, while Jake's other kids sided with him. But they lost. There was also a secret clause not read aloud that day, stating that anyone who contested the will would forfeit their share of the inheritance. It took nearly 3 years for all the legal battles to conclude. I was floored when we finally got the money. It was far more than I felt comfortable accepting. I wanted to give some to Mark's cousins, but he convinced me to keep it all, saying, "You cared for him when he needed you, without expecting anything. That makes you more family than any of those brickheads." They got what they deserved. Mark's grandpa had found a brilliant way to acknowledge those who genuinely loved and supported him, while shutting out the greedy opportunists hoping to cash in. An unorthodox approach, but one that rewarded genuine care and punished selfishness. The next one is an entitled people story. Moving to a new neighborhood is always a gamble. You never know what kind of folks you'll end up living next to. Unfortunately for me, I ended up with the neighbor from hell. A smug, entitled Karen who made it her mission to make my life miserable. The problem started right after I moved in. Karen came knocking on my door, all prim and proper with her pantsuit and severe blonde bob. She introduced herself as the president of the Homeowners Association and proceeded to patronize me about the Homeowner Association rules. Don't hang your laundry outside, don't let your grass grow more than 2 inches, blah blah blah. Honestly, I kinda zoned out after the first minute. I wasn't exactly thrilled to have this uppity lady lecturing me on things I could and couldn't do with my own property. I politely nodded along, waiting for her spiel to end. Once she finally stopped talking, I told her as nicely as I could that I hadn't actually joined the Homeowner Association, so her rules didn't apply to me. Well, you'd think I just insulted her mother with the way she reacted. Her mouth practically hit the floor before she composed herself and stormed off in a huff. I figured that would be the end of it, but oh no, I had only seen the beginning of Hurricane Karen. Over the next few weeks, she became obsessed with getting me to comply with her stupid rules. She would measure my grass with a ruler and leave angry notes if it grew over 2 inches. She reported me to the city because my mailbox was the wrong color. I started getting daily fines from the Homeowner Association for the most minor infractions. Karen was clearly on a mission to harass me into obeying her every command. But little did she know, I wasn't just a mild-mannered neighbor who would cave to her demands. I actually happened to be a real estate attorney who worked in property law. I knew my rights inside and out when it came to homeowners associations, and I wasn't about to let Karen's power trip intimidate me. After her little stunt with the fines, I decided it was time to put Karen in her place. I sent a strongly worded letter to the Homeowner Association Board, citing all the legal reasons why the fines were invalid and I owed them nothing. I made it crystal clear I was not an Homeowner Association member, and they had no jurisdiction over my property. Well, Karen did not take kindly to that at all. A few days later, I came home to find stakes and string all over my front lawn. That crazy lady had sent out a surveyor to try and claim that parts of my yard were common areas belonging to the Homeowner Association. I couldn't believe she was actually trying to steal sections of my property now. This meant war. I called the cops to report the unauthorized survey of my private property. The cops came and tore down all the stakes and string, warning Karen to stay away from my land. But we all know Karens don't give up that easy. She shifted to making my life hell through threats and intimidation instead of fines. She would leave notes like, "Your time here is limited, and this neighborhood would be better off without you." Her favorite thing was to blast loud music facing my house late into the night to keep me from sleeping. Finally, I'd had enough. It was time to teach Karen a lesson and get her off my back once and for all. I decided to hit her where it hurt, her wallet. I drew up a legal complaint suing Karen and the Homeowner Association for harassment, improper fines, and attempting to unlawfully seize my property. When Karen got served with the lawsuit, I thought she was going to have a meltdown right on my front lawn. Her face turned beet red and her mouth hung open. For once, she seemed at a loss for words. At the court hearing, she tried every trick in the book to wriggle out of the accusations, but I came prepared. I presented my evidence: the photographs, fines, threatening notes, and testimony about the sleep deprivation from her loud music. Meanwhile, Karen had nothing but her word against mine. Needless to say, the judge ruled fully in my favor. I was awarded a large settlement, and the Homeowner Association was barred from taking any action against my property going forward. As for Karen, she got a permanent restraining order to stay far away from me. The shocked look on Karen's face when the verdict was announced was priceless. She never expected me to fight back and win. But she learned the hard way that she's not the only one who can play dirty. After months of her nonsense, it felt amazing to finally put smug Karen in her place. She poked the bear one too many times, and now she's paying the price. Justice was served, and the neighborhood has been blissfully peaceful ever since. Turns out those legal skills came in handy after all. The moral of the story, don't mess with an undercover lawyer unless you want to get schooled in court. The next one is a petty revenge story. This isn't my petty revenge, but I was witness to it. As you all know, a lot of 2020 graduates got screwed over when it came to, graduating. To lift our spirits, Krispy Kreme decided that on National Donut Day, every 2020 graduate who could prove they were a graduate with a cap and gown, grad merch, a diploma, ECT would get a free dozen donuts. There is one Krispy Kreme in my town. Additionally, you should not underestimate the will of teenagers, young adults, and their desperation for free donuts because, my God, there were cars in droves wrapping around the Krispy Kreme and into the road for free donuts. Now, I need to describe the Krispy Kreme in order for this to make sense. They're a tiny building and there's two entrances, one closer to the drive-thru, one to the parking lot. Due to the overwhelming amount of customers, people were entering and getting in line through the parking lot entrance and wrapping around in a zigzaggy-like line around the parked cars. My sister and I were waiting like good noodles, but as we inched closer to the front, this Karen-esque obese woman in a muted orange Jeep rolled up beside us through the drive-thru entrance. We laughed. No way was anyone gonna let her in, because like I said, young broke adults and free donuts. Plus, some of us have been waiting there for over an hour, so if Karen here thought us ravenous children were gonna just let her scooch on in, she was sorely mistaken. Well, Karen didn't stop trying to merge in. And what you've yet to know, readers, is that my sister takes no bullcrap from the people who think they can just ram little cars over and get their way. So she floored it and got on the ass of the car in front of us, glaring at Karen. Karen is screaming at us, blowing on her horn and inching closer and closer. Insert WTF look. Suddenly, Karen floored it and screeched towards the passenger door where I was sitting, slamming on the brake just as her car was about to hit us. Both of us, and probably a lot of other people, screamed, "What the duck?" But she continued to lay on her horn, claiming we cut her off. I decided we should not engage in crazy, and ignored her. My sister, however, is not like me. She was boiling that this woman almost hit us. Karen had merged in behind us because I guess the car behind us didn't want to be almost hit like we were, and Karen refused to back up, so she rolled down the windows. I'm like, "B, don't do anything stupid, she'll rear-end us." And B said, "Let her, she can pay for it then." Karen wanted to order special donuts, apparently, and was being stupidly specific with each one. Or at least that's what little I heard over my sister's petty revenge. B had pulled up a playlist of graduation music. You know, the type they play as you walk across the stage to freedom or to a 9-5. And watching in her rear mirror, every time Karen opened her mouth, she cranked the radio as loud as it would go, drowning her out. Karen would lay on her horn demanding we shut up. B would turn it down. Karen would start to order again. B would turn it back up. I was laughing hysterically for the few minutes it lasted, and B was grinning until I said, "Listen, B, the people behind us want their donuts." Reluctantly, B gave in and rounded the corner to get out donuts. We could hear Karen screaming her order and how, "They better get them right!" As we pulled up, they asked for proof, and the girl said, "1 dozen donuts, gotcha," and ducked back inside. We waited. Karen rolled in behind us. A different worker appeared at the window. She leaned out. "Did you get helped?" she had asked. "Yeah," I answered. "We did. We're just waiting." The worker glanced out of the corner of her eye at the orange Jeep. She looked at us, then back at Karen. Karen blew on her horn again, likely demanding we hurry up. It was like a light bulb flashed, and a grin spread across her face. "Here you are," she exclaimed, passing 2 boxes of donuts through the window. "Enjoy and congratulations!" My sister and I were too stunned to say anything, assuming she saw the two of us and presumed we were both grads, so we took our donuts and left, laughing at our good fortune. Wanting to eat a donut, I popped open the top box and gasped. A special 12 dozen donuts. I was staring at it, then glanced at B. These were specifically ordered, not an assorted dozen, nor were they the special 2020 box that we received as me being a grad. On top of the box was written, "Special order." "B," I said, a quivering laugh escaping my lips. We stole Karen's donuts. The next one is a malicious compliance story. At my previous job, I worked as a peer trainer. Essentially, I was required to do my assigned job to its full capacity while also teaching everything to the newbies straight off the street. Not only did I agree to do this, I had volunteered for it, so this isn't a story about overwork. I worked in a large room where there were 5 stations of machines all lined up in a row from one wall to the other. All stations do the exact same thing, just with their own bugs and hiccups. One wall wasn't even a wall, but a giant window that looked into the break room. I have major anxiety about being snuck up on or watched without my knowing, enough to cause sudden anxiety attacks that can last for hours or until I can remove myself from the room, building, and sleep it off. I hate it. It's super inconvenient. Thankfully, this isn't an issue for the most part, because since I know the triggers, I can avoid them or set up precautions, like sitting with my back to a wall, and my co-workers are usually understanding and don't sneak up on me. This window also proves to be a distraction for the trainees, because they will try to look for and interact with their friends who are in the break room. I get that the job I was training them for was boring as heck, 12 hours long and on the night shift, but we were working on large machines that needed to be watched at all times in case they jammed or broke, which was often. Thankfully, my station was the third one away from the window, so I could easily keep everything maintained. The problem was, as it always seems to be in these stories, when a new supervisor moved to our area of the building. He was put in charge of Station 1 and Station 2. I'm assigned to Station 3. And technically speaking, Station 1 was supposed to be the training station. I had previously made a verbal agreement with his predecessor and the training team that I could stay on Hash 3 because of the previous points. Without asking or even giving me a heads up, I came back to work from a vacation day to find that I had already been reassigned to Section 1, despite the protests of my coworkers in my absence. Not to be that person, but there was a reason the training team was so willing to bend the rules for me. I was really good at my job. I was the go-to person to ask when something broke, and even maintenance couldn't fix it. I've been told by my own leads that they refused to let me transfer off their team without my insistence. So a sudden and unprompted transfer like this was commonly considered extremely rude and was usually used as a punishment. I figured that, as I had never met this new super before, I would just go talk to him and strike up the same deal as I had with all his predecessors for 4 years. I even had the lead for Station 1 come with me to confirm my case and act as witness. She knew me well as an operator because I'd come over to help her fix her machines all the time. I quickly realized that he was not going to budge on the transfer, so I told him calmly that I was ready to quit being a trainer that day and to have the extra pay cut off immediately. It's not like I was going to lose my job and the trainer pay was less than $1 more an hour. I was doing this because I wanted to, not because I needed it. He was shocked. We eventually agreed that I'd finish training my current trainee in my area while he looked for someone else, and until my request to quit training made its way to payroll. Cool. Apparently, not cool. He came back 3 days later saying, with no proof or paper, claiming that HR said I had no choice. This bothered me for a few reasons. First, he did not call me into a meeting for this. He, despite my many warnings to him about my anxiety triggers, snuck up behind me with a group of supervisors to deliver the order. Second, none of the supervisors with him were actually ones in charge of me in any capacity. My lead, direct supervisor, or any of the training team that I was under were not there. I want to make this clear, this man was not my boss in any way. He was assigned to the training section, yes, but had no authority over the trainers as trainers. So if a trainer was operating on a different section, he had no authority. The third thing that bothered me was that instead of looking for a new person like he promised, he took the time to find a way to force me to do what he wanted. As soon as he and his group appeared out of nowhere to quite literally surround me and block me in, I could already feel that stupid fight or flight kick in. I could barely keep my brain together enough to actually register what they were telling me. I could only agree in hopes that it would get them to leave sooner, hoping that I might be able to calm myself down and get in control again. I really hate causing a scene. When they left, I went to break before I moved to Section 1. Finally, this is where the malicious compliance comes in. Despite my best efforts, I could not calm myself over break. So when I went back and moved to sit beside the giant window, the added anxiety of that hit me pretty hard, just like I had warned. So I decided that since this came with a full and repeated warning from my end, I wasn't going to do anything to mask the anxiety attack this time. I don't have them often, and usually do my best to minimize the burden they cause to the people around me. This results in a few silent tears and lots of fidgeting and a bit of pacing. This time, however, I just let it happen. We're talking rapid, frantic pacing, red-faced and tears streaming down my cheeks, strained breathing and digging my nails into my arms and hands. My poor trainee had no idea what was going on, and I was unable to teach her anything because I will go non-verbal when my anxiety acts up, which means I'm completely useless as a trainer. When my coworker got back from his break, a prior trainee of mine and an old sweetheart, he covered me so I could go home. After a few calls and texts to my leads and coworkers, I used up some PTO and didn't come back in until I was no longer officially a trainer and could transfer back to my area. That supervisor was fired a few weeks later due to multiple complaints on top of being caught in the act of ducking a coworker inside the building. She got fired too, much to the joy of everyone else. She was a Karen and a suck-up, and yelled at two of my very young and nervous trainees for following orders she didn't understand. Honestly, they're a match made in hell, and I hope they ended up happily together so no one else would have to suffer their attention. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.